Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone to episode 1 of Sync and Flow, the podcast. I'm so excited to be here today recording this for you guys. I've been wanting to start a podcast for probably the last 5 years, and recently it's just been becoming a louder and louder and louder idea in my mind that this is what I need to do and this is how I can add more value and give more free content to you guys. So, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. This episode is going to be a hopefully short introduction to who I am, a bit of a backstory about me, so you guys can just get to know me a bit better. And yeah, I want to be chatting about my vision for this podcast going forward. So, my name is Josie Thorne. I was born in Cape Town, South Africa, where I still live today. I am a Cancerian sun, Virgo moon, and Aquarius rising. I am an Enneagram 4 and a manifesting generator in human design. I grew up in your average family in a very privileged home here in Hout Bay in Cape Town to two hippie parents, although they are extremely hardworking professionals. So I guess they wouldn't take too kindly to being labeled as hippies, although they are. I grew up in a very liberal home. I never had any sort of religious dogma put onto me. My home was more atheist or agnostic, you could say. I considered myself an atheist for a very long time, and that was before I started getting into spirituality. Um, I grew up going to many sorts of spiritual events and sound journeys with my parents and friends of theirs who are hosting these sorts of events. So I've always, from a young age, been pretty comfortable in spiritually facilitated spaces. And I guess that has given me quite a strong foundation to do the work that I'm now doing. Sorry, just had to have a sip of water. Um, so yeah, I went to a Anglican girls' school here in Cape Town and got a very privileged education at this private girls' school. Shout out to all my Saint Sips girls. My schooling career was very privileged. I got very good education. Um, I was constantly surrounded by women, and so there was this bit of a craziness at school because we were all hormonal teenagers, and there was just a lot of hormones flying around that no one really knew what to do with. We weren't really educated um, on how to handle ourselves and how to understand our bodies, unfortunately, as the education system can be pretty limiting in that way. I do remember getting my first sex education class at age 12. Um, and that was pretty awkward, although pretty in depth, and I was pretty proud of my school for tackling those issues quite young. Um, I started my period at the age of 13 and suffered with severe PMS for quite a long time. And I also suffered from cramps, although they weren't too bad. Um, yeah, I then went on to the pill at age 15, as recommended by my mother, who's also a doctor. She is a GP for kids. So she was my doctor at the time. And yeah, although I didn't want to go on the pill, she recommended that it was the best option for me at the time because I was actually having such severe PMS that my PMS and periods were impacting my marks at school, my grades. And so my grades would actually be 20% lower than normal during my PMS and period phase. And so obviously this brought a lot of concern to my parents, and the PMS that I experienced was also very emotionally debilitating and mentally debilitating, and I really was not my best self during that time. I brought a lot of chaos and anger and sadness to my family during those times, and so my parents were worried about me, and so this was my mom's main concern for putting me on the pill, even though she told me it was to help my skin. Clearly, at the time, she could not explain the depth of emotional maturity needed to understand the complexity of the situation with regarding to my emotional and mental health. Okay, so I went on the pill at age 15. I was on the pill for a solid 7 years. I was actually luckily not too affected by it. I mean, I knew lots of friends who had to change pills so many times because they had this side effect and that side effect and this and that. And I luckily didn't really have much of that. Um, I was on Yaz for the entire time. But the last 2, 3 years of being on the pill, so probably from about matric, so age 18. So I'd say actually 4 years, probably about from matric age 18, um, to when I went off the pill at age 22, I was experiencing extreme anxiety. I've always been prone to anxiety, but I never experienced it in the way that I did during those last 4 years. I was an emotional mess. I didn't know how to support myself. I didn't know how to look after myself. No one had taught me, how that taking care of yourself is so important, especially for us women. We are not meant to be go, 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 do all the time. And during varsity, I actually experienced multiple phases of burnout. I got shingles. I experienced depression on and off for quite a while. And these were things that I just accepted as normal. I never ever thought that the pill could be contributing to my mental health state. I was not aware enough of myself, and because I went on the pill at such a young age, at age 15, I just accepted that that's just what I did. I just took it every day, and it had nothing to do with my mental health. It was all just about you know um my sorting out my skin and helping with my PMS. Although I did hear my mom often say the pill doesn't seem to be helping with your mood swings. It felt like, if anything, the pill just numbed my own emotional connection to myself during those mood swings. It didn't actually suppress the mood swings themselves, because I still got bad PMS and I still experienced mood swings and depression and anxiety. Anyway, I was not emotionally and mentally aware of my mental health at that time. I just accepted this as normal. Um, I even tried mushroom microdosing to help with the depression. Um, and nothing really seemed to help. It seemed to help a little bit, but it always ended up coming back, and the anxiety just became this constant thing that I lived with. Although it would have seasons of being especially bad and seasons of being less noticeable. Okay, so I graduated varsity in 2020. And in 2019, I was going through a very hard time. Well, before that hard time actually started, I started dating my current boyfriend end of 2017. And so in 2019, my mom said to me, okay, you've been with this guy for a while now. I think it's time that you go to the gynecologist, just to have a regular checkup. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, let's just do this. I kept on missing my appointments, delaying it. It's not a very pleasant thing to do, but I knew I had to do it. So off I went. And my first ever gynecologist appointment, she's doing the scans, doing the thing, looking at my uterus. And, I'm just speaking to her about myself and like who I am and the fact that I'm very healthy and I do lots of yoga, and I exercise and, I'm very health conscious type of person. And she said to me, oh, that's strange. Usually health conscious people don't want to be on the pill. And that was quite strange for me, because I was like, what's wrong with the pill? I mean, isn't it just like a pill? I don't even know what it's doing to me. Anyway, and so she was doing the scans, and she actually found a cyst on my ovary, but she didn't really want to give away how serious it was. And so she was like, no, I need to ask a colleague for a second opinion. Please come back in 2 weeks time. Maybe the cyst will have passed with your cycle. And I say cycle in air quotes because when you're on the pill, you do not cycle naturally. The period that you have is a drug induced bleed. Many people do not know this, including me at the time. Okay. And so I came back 2 weeks later and the cyst was still there. And the gynecologist pretty much said, oh, yeah, I chatted to my colleague. This is a dermoid cyst and it's 5 by 5 centimeters, which is freaking massive. And we are booking you into surgery for 1 month's time. And that was that. I was completely shocked. I was completely blown away. I thought I was the healthiest person ever. I'd never been to hospital before. I had never had surgery before. I really had no major health concerns in my entire life. I've never even broken a bone, for God's sake. So this was a massive, massive wake up call to me. Okay. Um, and honestly, I didn't even know that the cyst was there. I thought I had begun to feel it a few months prior during intimacy with my partner. He would push up against it and I would feel this pain. But I always thought that it was, just in my head, or it was just something that was gonna pass or be gone the next day or whatever. I never really knew what this was or what this felt like. Um, and before I actually went to see the gynae, because I went to see the gynae in June of 2019, sorry, backtrack on the story. In April of 2019, I did my first ever mushroom journey. For those of you that do not know what a mushroom journey is, it is a sacred ceremony where you take 5 grams of dried mushrooms in one go, and you have this 3 to 4 hour trip that is a very, very deep internal emotional, mental, spiritual reset. It is a deep, deep experience that only you will know if you've experienced it yourself. It is, for me, it was extremely beautiful. Other people have a bit of a hard time depending on how able they are to let go and surrender to the mushrooms as medicine. Luckily, I had been experimenting with consciousness, experimenting with psychedelics for the past 3 years already. So I was pretty okay and pretty good friends with mushrooms by then. And this experience just kind of showed me the depths of the layers of this reality and how things are not as they seem. There's so much more than just this 3D reality and what we can perceive with our eyes and our senses. Our senses are actually quite limited when it comes to perceiving the multidimensional nature of reality. And so this mushroom journey really started to awaken my eyes to the multidimensional nature of reality, and made me realize that, okay, like, I don't really know what's going on. I'm not claiming to, but there is so much more that I'm not being exposed to, that I want to explore, and the mushrooms really opened up this deep curiosity within me. I've always been quite an adventurous person, and I think this journey really sparked that on a much deeper, more embodied level. Um, so yeah, I did this mushroom journey in April 2019 with my mother, my dear hippie mother. She is an angel and also very brave at the age of 50 something to do a mushroom journey. I don't know many other people's parents who have done mushroom journeys, although this is becoming more and more common, especially here in Cape Town, where there's quite a alternative psychedelic and healing community that is starting to form. Anyway, um let me jump back to the story. So I did this mushroom journey 2019 of April, and then in June 2019 was when I went to see the gynecologist for the first time. And that's when she was like, okay, are we booking your surgery for end of July 2019? Okay, so this was quite a scary time for me. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what the cyst meant. Anyway, I had this operation end of July 2019. It was a keyhole surgery, so not that invasive, although all surgeries are invasive. I remember waking up after the operation and honestly just wanting to run away. They had to push me back on my bed and remind me I've just had surgery. Um, I was pumped full of morphine, and I was emotional as fuck. I had to stay in hospital one night and then went home the next day. And honestly, my body felt so stiff. There was so much pain in my body. There was so much pain in my abdomen. I I remember that first night home, my mom giving me a massage and just lying on the bed, like crying and crying and crying because of how much tension was in my body. And this is when I started to learn that just because the mind is unconscious, when they put you to sleep in surgery, just because you are unconscious doesn't mean that your body is okay. Your body feels everything. Your body knows everything. Your body has its own muscle memory. You've heard this before. And so just because your mind isn't conscious or isn't present doesn't mean your body isn't living, experiencing, feeling, sensing, everything that is going on. Okay, and this was kind of my introduction to this concept, which I didn't really know much about before, the difference between the conscious and subconscious minds, right? um so yeah, I had this operation, and the following 8 months after this operation was honestly the hardest 8 months of my life. After this operation, I fell into a very, very deep depression. I experienced some of the worst anxiety I'd ever experienced in my life. I also started to experience social anxiety, which is not something I've ever had to experience before. I've always been a very naturally outgoing, naturally confident, naturally bubbly woman, and social anxiety was just not something I was used to. And so experiencing that for the first time really showed me how disconnected from my true self I was. Okay, I started to realize, well, actually, I remember going to university, and one of the girls that was friends with saying to me, oh, you just had a cyst operated? Well, my mom is a naturopathic doctor and a medical doctor, and she said that cysts are increased causes from the pill. And so this was quite strange for me. I never I never thought of this before. I never knew this connection. And so the more I thought about it, the more and more it just made sense to me. Okay. And so I knew that I had to get off the pill, but I was in no way mentally or emotionally stable enough to do so. I also started working with an energy healer for the first time in my life and started to explore alternative forms of therapy and alternative forms of healing. I went to see this healer that I worked with was a quantum healer. She also was a light language channeler, and she really helped to facilitate this massive journey of transition for me. You know, during this time I was also going through a massive spiritual awakening, and so many people speak about experiencing extreme mental health issues during their spiritual awakening process, and this was exactly what I was going through. I knew my entire reality was crumbling. Everything I'd thought that I was, everything that I knew about who I was and my body was completely shattering. You know, I realized how disconnected from myself I had actually become, how anxious, how depressed, how lonely, how isolated, how just out of alignment with my true self I'd become, you know. And especially with my womb, you know, I really realized that the cyst was my womb's way of trying to connect back to me, trying to make connection, trying to scream for attention, you know, trying to get my attention to focus on her, you know. And this operation and this experience really brought me back to that focus that I had been disconnected from my womb for so long. For 7 years, I hadn't had a natural period. For 7 years, I hadn't thought about my womb. For 7 years, I hadn't experienced, you know, natural hormones flowing through my body. And so this was the start of a very, very powerful journey for me, you know, and really was the catalyst to me doing the womb healing work that I do with women now, with my clients now. You know, this was my background, and I knew that, you know, if I went through all this pain and this suffering, then and I could come out the other side, then I could help others with that, you know. But it was a long time until I realized that. During this time, these 8 months after my operation, I couldn't have sex for about 6 months with my partner without crying. And so that was extremely hard for him. It was extremely hard for me. I felt so sexually disconnected from myself, whereas my sexual energy and my sexual life force and my sexual connection to myself, I'd kind of just taken for granted. Before, you know, I'd always managed to feel pleasure very easily. I'd always managed to be very confident in the bedroom. I'd always managed to just, you know, allow it to flow naturally. And so when this was taken away from me after the operation, I really realized that I'd been taking this side of myself for granted, and I hadn't been paying attention or respect to it. Okay, so I was learning so much about myself during this time. At beginning of 2020, I decided to come off the pill, but my mother said to me, no, you cannot not be on anything. So I chose to go the more natural route, and I got a copper non-hormonal IUD put in, and then I went off the pill end of January. At the beginning of March, my friend invited me to do this facilitated training with her. I'd previously been to one red tent and I said yes without really knowing what it would entail. This facilitated training was happening as the whole world was starting to crumble and freak out about COVID. So it was a very powerful time. I did this training and it was a very intense 2 weeks of in-person training and rituals and sharing and diving deep into our shadows and psyche and all the things we had repressed within ourselves. Because what embodied leadership looks like is you cannot teach what you haven't gone through. You cannot share what you haven't gone through yourself. You cannot, I mean, you can, but it's so much more deeper when you have that lived life experience, and you can teach and operate from that space. So the Red 10 training was really about going deep into your own shadows so that you could help hold conscious spaces where women feel safe enough to share their vulnerabilities and their deepest, darkest secrets and their deepest shadows, and feel safe doing so. So yeah, I did that training beginning of 2020 in March. And after that training, I had just come off the pill, and I remember saying, I don't know when my period's going to come back. I have no idea. I can't predict that. But 1 month later, I got my period back. 1 month later. And that just blew my mind. And it blew my mind because I knew women that had been off the pill for a year or longer and still had not got their period back. And so for me to get my period back 1 month after coming off the pill, or 2 months, sorry, after coming off the pill, I realized that all these practices and rituals and feminine embodiments, womb awakening practices that I did in this facilitated training really awoke my feminine energy that was dormant in my womb. And this feminine energy healed me, and it brought back my period, and it restored fertility and vitality and life force back to my body and back to my being. It really felt like a deep level of soul healing, and this started to really awaken my eyes because I did all of this through the natural energetics and practices of my body. I didn't have any doctors or extra hormones or medicine or any sort of support to help me get my period back. It was completely natural. I healed myself in that way, and this awoke my mind to the fact that this is possible. If I can heal myself and naturally and get my period back without any external help, then so can every other woman. I'm not special. I've just been privileged to have the opportunity to be taught these practices and these understandings. And so that really spurred my journey. It was another 9 months of integration after that original training, where we integrated and we held circles and we connected and we dove deep into our own personal healing. And after 9 months, I started hosting women's circles here in Cape Town. And I started getting such beautiful responses from all the women that started to attend. And I realized how deeply needed this medicine is, especially for young women like myself. We all have grown up in a patriarchal society, and unfortunately our maternal lineage is indoctrinated with this patriarchal ways, and our mothers could only support us and help us so far. But these new teachings that are actually not that new, these women's circles are ancient practices. Womb wisdom is an ancient understanding. Red tents are ancient practices. For those of you that do not know what Red Tent is an international organization. It's not owned by anyone, but anyone can. It's an NGO. Anyone can adopt its philosophies and take on its teachings and share it with the world. Um, and red tent is derived from back in the day when we as women would live in tribes and communities. We would all be synced up to the same cycle, and so we would all bleed over the new moon and ovulate over the full moon. And so during the new moon, we would all remove ourselves from the men, from society, and go out and sit in the red tent, in the menstrual hut, and really just free bleed into the earth and connect as women on a very real and deep level, on a very spiritual level. And it would be this beautiful cross pollination of generational wisdom. You know, it would be women of all ages and all generations sharing their life stories. You know, it would be the crones, which are women that are past menopause, sharing their wisdom to the mothers, who are women who've had children, who would be sharing their wisdom to the maidens, who are women without children. And it would be this beautiful, beautiful sharing of generational wisdom and generational knowledge. And so this would create a beautiful foundation and learning platform for women to understand themselves and also understand the deeper currents of what it means to be a woman, the deeper understandings of what it means to have the potential to give life, and be the bridge. You know, the uterus, the womb is really the bridge between the spirit world and the physical world, and we as women are guardians of this portal. You know, we have a multidimensional portal within our bodies. And, you know, Hippocrates even said that the womb is an animal within an animal, you know, really denoting a lot of spiritual intelligence to the womb, you know. And so, yeah, red tent is, in the modern day world, is a beautiful revival of these practices and of these ancient understandings and spiritual depth to what it means to be a woman, and bringing women back together. You know, one of the biggest challenges that women face in living under patriarchy is oppression from each other. You know, women, the biggest enemy to women is women. You know, if and this is what patriarchy has created, is created division within people, between races, between cultures, between generations. It has created this hierarchy and this division, you know, where we have women fighting women, you know, over the sake of a man, you know, and we have women pitted against each other in terms like the other woman, you know. And really all this backstabbing and gossiping and just all these manifestations of the unhealthy feminine. And the only reason that the collective feminine is unhealthy is because of patriarchy and the divisions that it's created within the mind, body, and soul, you know. And this is not something that's new. This is something that has been going on since the beginning of patriarchy 2000 years ago. And so it is actually embedded in our DNA as women, you know. So it's really our journey and our collective responsibility to heal ourselves, to heal our sister wounds, to heal our mother wounds, to heal our wombs, you know, and find sovereignty within ourselves so that we may usher in the new earth and be living embodiments of the new earth paradigm, and help usher in this age of Aquarius that is starting now. So after I got the IUD, I had it in for 2 years, and I actually was experiencing quite intense side effects from the IUD, because when you start doing womb wisdom and womb healing, you actually start to recalibrate your sensitivity and to reestablish your sensitivity in your womb and in your yoni. Yoni is the sacred word for vagina. And when you recalibrate and start to resensitize yourself, you actually start to feel everything so much deeper, okay? like so much deeper and so much more sensitive, which is amazing because it means that your pleasure becomes way more deeply enhanced. But it also means that any pain or discomfort that you feel also becomes enhanced. And so what I found was every time I was intimate with my partner, he would actually poke the strings of my IUD, and that would send shockwaves up the string and into my womb. And every time he would touch it, my womb would contract and I would contract because I would feel this pain. It would be extremely painful, and majority of the time I'd actually have to ask him to stop or slow down or go less deep, you know. And as a sensual, sexually embodied woman, when you want to have that deeply connective sex and there's something in the way preventing you from doing that, and it's nothing to do with you, it's to do with an external factor, that was extremely infuriating for me, you know. And it would happen again and again, and I would only find myself actually being able to go deep and release deeply and have these deep cervical orgasms when I was on substances, whether that be alcohol or drugs or any sort of substance that would numb my ability to feel, okay. And that's not nice, because you want to be fully present when you are having sex and when you're experiencing pleasure with your body and you with your partner. You know, you want to be fully present and fully there and able to feel every single touch and nuance and subtle energies, you know. Sex is so much more than just the physical, and when you're numbed out, you disconnect yourself from the spiritual, emotional aspects of sex, okay. Which are deeply required for a woman to be able to have these deep cervical orgasms, these deep releases, these deep full body orgasms, okay. It's really, really important for a woman to be connected to her sensuality, her spirituality, and her emotional nature in order to go to these places. And so what I started finding was that the IUD was preventing me from going deep into my own pleasure, and therefore disconnecting me from my partner. Because they say that in Tantra, they say that a woman's cervix is connected deeply to her heart, okay? And the tip of a man's penis is connected to his heart. So when the cervix and the penis meet, it is this beautiful spiritual meeting of these two hearts, of your heart and your partner's heart, you know, of the man's heart and the woman's heart. And so that adds an extra layer of connection and intimacy and emotion and spirituality into the sex. And so for 2 years, I was cutting myself off from that depth. And I kept on putting it off. I kept on saying, no, it's okay. I'll just grin and bear it, you know. And this comes from this conditioning of women are meant to suffer, you know. And that has been conditioned into our DNA for thousands of years, you know. And so I just kept on putting it aside, pushing it away, suppressing it, suppressing it. Even though most of the time that my partner would touch the strings, I would be in so much pain, I would almost start crying, and then that would ruin the moment, you know, and that would create disconnection from me and my partner, you know. And so that was extremely traumatic on another level. And that created a lot of tension and a lot of a buildup of tension, because every time you contract, you're actually building up the tension. It's not like starting from zero every time, you know, you're building on the tension of previous times, you know, so it just gets stiffer and stiffer and stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. The muscles of the pelvic floor become more and more contracted and more stiff, okay. And so this is what was happening to me. And eventually I said, enough is enough. And at the beginning of this year, in February 2022, on the 2nd of the 2nd, 2022, which is a beautiful magical number portal, I got my IUD out. And in April, I did my fertility awareness course with the amazing Rona Marimi, who is a Cape Town based fertility awareness educator, FAM, which is an amazing natural birth control method, is a natural contraceptive method. And it basically teaches us the power of cycling naturally, and the power of being in connection to our womb and to our cycles. Because did you know that a woman can only get pregnant for 5 to 7 days every month? Every single month, she can only get pregnant. Every single cycle, she can only get pregnant between 5 to 7 days. And that is one period. Okay. When you realize this fact, when you learn this fact, and this is a fact that has been kept secret from women for a long time, when you learn this fact, it actually makes all permanent birth control solutions seem completely redundant, okay? Because why would you take a pill every single day of your life if you are only fertile for 5 to 7 days of the month? That doesn't make sense, right? Why would you put a permanent, foreign object into your womb, into your uterus, if you're only fertile 5 to 7 days a month, and the rest of the time you're not fertile? That object, that IUD or the pill or the patch or the injection or whatever contraceptive you are on, is completely redundant. It is not protecting you from anything, because you are not at harm, or I don't want to say at harm, you're not at risk of getting pregnant, okay? But because the patriarchy has brainwashed women to be afraid of getting pregnant, we suppress this part of ourselves, and we don't learn further. We just believe what we are told by our doctors and our gynaes. A gynae has never ever told me you can get pregnant 5 to 7 days a month. Gynaes don't educate women on these things. Doctors don't educate women on these things, because if they did, the woman would not go back to them, okay? If women were truly self-empowered and truly sovereign with their health and their fertility, they would not need doctors. They would not need gynecologists unless it was an emergency situation. Okay? Let that sink in. When I found that out, I was flabbergasted and honestly so angry that I'd never been taught this before. And so this is my intention with this podcast and with Sync and Flow, my brand, is to bring you, the audience, information that has been kept secret from women for thousands of years, to keep us small, to keep us enslaved to doctors and the pharmaceutical industry, to keep us enslaved to the patriarchy, okay? Birth control is just an extension of patriarchy. We were taught that being on birth control is self-empowering because you can sleep with so many men and not get pregnant and have the best, wildest, most adventurous sex life, and that is empowering. And I call bullshit on that. That is not empowering. Being disconnected from your womb is not empowering. Being disconnected from the intimacy and the sacredness of sex, that is not empowering. Being disconnected from the spiritual aspect of sex, that is not empowering. Being giving your sacred, letting anyone walk into your sacred yoni temple, letting anyone come into your sacred space as a woman, into your sacred vagina, that is not empowering. Just letting anyone do that is not empowering. And so what I've seen within myself and within my clients is that when we are on hormonal birth control, it disconnects us from our intuition, which stems from our womb space, our sacral chakra. And when we are disconnected from our intuition, we lack discernment. We lack the ability to properly evaluate whether or not someone is the right partner for us, whether or not they are worthy or valued enough, whether they value us enough to come into our sacred yoni space, and that discernment is very subtle and it's nuanced, because a lot of men they act nice just to get sex, and then as soon as they get sex, they run away, or they abandon us, they reject us, and so this has happened to me in the past. This has happened to so many women I know. And if we had the intuitive discernment before that was maybe not blocked by hormonal contraception, maybe we would have the discernment to be like, okay, I'm not going to give myself to this man, because he doesn't seem like a trustworthy guy. He doesn't seem reliable. He doesn't seem like he would stick around after we did the deed. And this is the sovereignty. Sovereignty is the ability to have clear discernment and clear awareness of everything that you are doing, saying, and being. So Google defines sovereignty is the defining authority within individual consciousness, social construct, or territory. And so sovereignty enables personal autonomy. Sovereignty enables personal autonomy. This means when you are personally autonomous, it means that you are fully aware of the decisions that you are making. There are no hidden agendas. You are fully self-reliant. This is what sovereign means. Self-reliance. Radical self-reliance, radical self-responsibility, radical self-ownership. These are all themes that tie into sovereignty. And the more women that become sovereign within their mind, body, and soul, the faster we will heal this planet. The more women that become sovereign in their womb space, the faster we will heal the sexual distortions that have made themselves available to corrupt and just create false illusions on this planet, or surrounding sexuality and surrounding the current patriarchal paradigm that we find ourselves in. The more sovereign you are, the more self-responsibility you take, the more empowered you are, because you are operating within this self-aware, self-conscious, self-governing, self-autonomous state. You are in charge of you. No one else can speak for you. No one else can know you. No one else can act for you, because no one else is you. And so this is what sovereign means. And so if we want to heal the feminine and help the feminine rise on this planet, the more men and women that are in their full-bodied autonomy and full-bodied sovereignty, the faster this planet will heal, the deeper this planet will heal. Sovereignty is the new sexy. Sovereignty is the new trend. Sovereignty is the new everything. If you are not sovereign, then you are not taking full responsibility for your life and for your actions and for your decisions. Sovereignty is everything, and it is at the core of one of the core values of Sync and Flow is spiritual, sexual autonomy, spiritual, sexual sovereignty. This is how we rise. This is how we empower ourselves and our sisters and our brothers. All of this has really led me to where I am today. I probably wasn't able to touch on everything, but as we go along in the podcast, you'll learn more about me, you'll learn more about what I do, you'll learn more about how I envision Sync and Flow as my brand, and envision Sync and Flow, this podcast. And I would love to have you join me. So please do get in contact with me. I will leave all of my contact details and social media and website links in the description below. And I'm so excited to connect with you further. But yeah, please, if you are a woman who is in trouble, if you are a woman who's in pain, who is suffering with her periods, please don't hesitate to contact me. I have been able to heal my period and now experience beautiful, pain-free, blissful periods. And I rarely have this vision for every woman. It may seem crazy, especially if you have extremely painful, debilitating cramps. Please know that there is a opportunity for you to heal. There is so many resources, and you don't have to live the rest of your life suffering in pain. Another thing that patriarchy has taught us is that it's painful to be a woman, that being a woman is synonymous with suffering. And I'm calling a fat BS on that, because being a woman is actually about pleasure and power, and finding power in our sensuality and finding power in our vulnerability, you know. And so we really shouldn't accept that suffering is a part of our reality, because it doesn't have to be. And I've been able to completely transform my entire life through womb wisdom and through my womb awakening journey. And this is a journey I want to guide every single woman on. You know, this is part of my purpose, and this is part of my mission here on earth. So please do connect with me, follow me on Instagram, watch my YouTube videos, and yeah, connect with me, because there's so much I want to share, and I have to share. So yeah, there's going to be many more resources coming your way. I am very close to releasing a free womb healing ebook, as well as a paid version which has much more content. And yeah, you're going to be seeing some juicy masterclasses and courses coming from me in the near future. So please look out for those. If anything I've said on this podcast is resonating with you, hopefully it is. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to this first episode, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now, loves.